This is last 3 edition of the biennial. You could see a gist of the character of that area.
India, with such a complex, layered, rich, profound history and culture of art, contemporary art and 20th century art, and this being the first biennial, you can imagine the amount of energy that we have in terms of expectations, the artists and the community, and internationally there exists. So this is what this biennial is doing, and it's been wonderful to be here.
ഇത് കലയുടെ ഒരു ഉത്സവം മാത്രമല്ല, കാഴ്ചയുടെ ഒരു ആഘോഷം മാത്രമല്ല, മനുഷ്യന്റെ ഭാവിയുമായി ബന്ധപ്പെട്ട നീറുന്ന പ്രശ്നങ്ങൾ, പൊള്ളുന്ന യാഥാർത്ഥ്യങ്ങൾ, അതും കലാസൃഷ്ടിയിലൂടെ ബിനാലെയുടെ വേദി ചർച്ച ചെയ്യുന്നു എന്നുള്ളത് ഈ ബിനാലയെ കൂടുതൽ അർത്ഥമുള്ളതാക്കുന്നു.
The 2014 edition of the biennial isn't so much a reflection on Cochin, it's a reflection from Cochin.
What's so interesting, I think, is the location.
I see Kochi offering a new important platform to rethink the relationship between the South and Islam.
The most amazing thing about the Kochi Muzirish Biennale is this: after the first edition, the second edition, that imagine the local public, the general public which I see, whenever I kind of move around in various venues, the common people, they come, they are not necessarily from art background.
Forming in the people of an eye is been indirectly taken from an old Vedic belief, in fact from Rig Veda, that when a sage opens his eye to the world, he assimilates all the multiplicity of the world with this one look at the world.
It's been an extraordinary and intense experience. Biennale that doesn't feel like it has a relationship to a museum in the same way as other biennales do. It feels very rooted in its architectural vernacular context, and there's a wonderful democracy to that.
I'm very happy to see an artist biennale. It is now becoming clear to me why we have an artist biennale, and I think an artist as curator is very different from a curator, and I see that in this biennale because I really feel the different aspects to Sudarshan's thinking in the works that he selected.
I see that the experimentation in every area that one would like to have is being demonstrated. This is the ideal way to conserve heritage, ideal way to find thousands of people coming here and witnessing the new, age-old and extremely futuristic. And I think this kind of marriage makes this site very memorable, important, significant.
One of the threads in this biennial is, of course, there are many works with sound. You can read many words, but you can also hear many sounds. And I wonder why that is. Maybe we are living in an age of the dictatorship of the visual, that there is an invitation to speak again, to speak with one another. And I think that's the strength of the Kochi Biennial, that it's a way of conversation, not only among the artists, not only the artists with Kochi and with the curator, but also a conversation of the public.
A huge social agenda as well as an artistic one. I think it's very important because it's a risk. It's an economic risk, and it's a if you like, a social and aesthetic risk. So, but we have to encourage that because we want creative citizens, not passive ones.
As far as art scene is concerned, I think Kochi Muziris Biennale is the finest example of what we have produced in the last decade. I don't think there is any comparable event, both in terms of content as well as in terms of the way in which it is organized.
Possibilities for non-alienated life, which means that I'm thinking not only this Biennale, the next edition, not only to build it around an exhibition model, but to build it around, along with the exhibition model, to have a kind of a laboratory situation in which knowledge will be continuously produced, not by me, by participants, and everybody can be a participant in that laboratory.
Kounteya?
So let's start with you, Kounteya. You involved yourself in the creation of festivals. Can you explain a little bit about what you've been doing?
We've done many shows before and stuff, but right now I have, for example, 3 festivals in my hand starting from day after tomorrow. We have the first ever Lit Fest in the middle of the sea. It's happening in Mumbai. We've explored how water can be used as a medium. We're also saying that it's the best way to keep people from not leaving the exhibition. So they can't really jump off the ship. So that's day after tomorrow. We also have the Kounteya Design Week, which is going to be from February 8th. I'm also the director for that. And then we are trying to create what is Asia's largest photography festival, which is going to be from February 28th to March 6th, looking at 3 different mediums. That's in Calcutta, and that's going to be in. So till now, Imami, this space is going to be one of the main places where we're going to show some incredible work. But what we're trying to do is get all kinds of institutions in Calcutta, from government buildings to galleries like this, to people's houses, come together and create what is the largest living gallery in India. That is one of the things that I'm really working on, 3 of them for the time being now. But I can tell you this, that one of the great exciting moments in life is when you're getting to the festival, and not when it ends. It almost like ends for me the day the festival starts. So the exciting thing and stuff is there. When I look at Kochi, for example, it's such a moment of pride for all of us, right? But what I like most about the fact about festivals in India now are 3 festivals that really changed India. Kochi, the Headhunters Festival, the Hornbill in Nagaland, and also the other one, which is the Jaipur Lit Fest, right? All 3 festivals are not in mainstream cities, which is the exciting bit. So that is where we need to understand that festivals do not really require metropolitan cities to actually get famous. Content is king, isn't it, Bose?
I do agree on couple of festivals, but I'm not sure about the placement of Jaipur.
Right.
Jaipur may be great, but it's transformed into something else right now. So we are talking about building and sustaining arts festivals in South Asia, right? We cannot really talk about Kumbh Mela, Ganpati festivals and other stuff. But as in the art terms, I would say that, it is one of the most important thing when it comes to festivals. The public, they create, they give everything. If you don't, I just read out a few words, from I was going to read it out, but a festival should be much more experiential than intellectual. it should be people-centric and participatory. Do not follow any successful model, but you can learn from it. Families are the fragrance of the location. Guests are the ambassadors of your project. Do not take common man for granted. They are the tastemakers. And I can't go on talking about it. Yeah.
So how would you respond to his earlier statement about Jaipur and so on? And I mean, do you think location is the key role, or do you think there are other factors involved in creating successful festivals?
I think content needs to merge. I don't think festivals, for example. I think the Romans understood festivals the best. From the 1st century BC when they came in to 1200 years of rule, if you look at how they used festivals, including the Colosseum, you will realize that they understood that festivals were actually the stepping stones to power. It was also the stepping stones to actually protect the arts. So, so one of the things that, we see in the festivals today in India, for example, is that, you get the content and you create that and juxtapose that with the space around it, right? In this case, for example, his festival, the way he's used the space, the way he's used Kochi, for example, it has not just remained as a festival, it has become the biggest selling point for tourism, right? And the government sponsors it, part of it, I believe, right?
It's it is government is a supporter,
right.
But it is initiated by artists,
right?
Driven by artists, curated
right.
by artists. This is the difference in between, I think, any other festival.
True.
When I look at the Biennales, this is a difference I find it.
Right.
Yeah.
No, which is great, because how many governments actually come forward? They did come forward because they realized that, this is a great product, isn't it? And then they use that as a medium for tourism.
No, I disagree on this. It was started with the cultural minister's point of view,
right.
like when he visited Mumbai. We had a conversation. Of course, we had great minds like Mr. M.A. Baby,
right.
Miriam Alexander Baby, who was the education and culture minister. We had time to have conversations. We could spend hours and hours with him. We used to spend time, even early mornings, 3 a.m. and all, we used to have conversations about how we should do it, where we make this happen. And sometimes also we felt that, there was no money to make it happen. So he said, even if we sell our property, we make it happen. That kind of confidence is given by a minister of the state, and also then you can continue with that kind of confidence.
And that kind of madness.
Yeah.
You require that kind of madness and love for arts to actually go ahead with it. One of the things that, when we were doing the Kolkata International Photo Festival, the KIPF 2019, from February 28th, when I actually came on board and we had one country which was part of the team. Today we have 45 countries and works coming in from 45 countries. We have all the greats from around the country actually giving us our work. Jyoti Bhatt, who received the Padma Shri yesterday, the great Jyoti Bhatt, 30 photographs of his. S. Paul, the Indian of father photography. All kinds of work coming in. But when we started building a team and we started talking about the fact that we must have a festival, and we have such a great crop of photographers. And when I asked those photographers, who are the people we must get to the festival from around the country? All of them had the same names. Which I thought was sad, because all of them knew the same people. So there was a lack of education to understand, why don't we go out and search for great artists or photographers who we don't maybe know? It's like, what used to happen in the 80s in Calcutta, everybody went for a heart surgery to Vellore. Everybody would head to Vellore, right? But that is where the importance of a festival is. That content is king. It has to be run by artists themselves. And they have to be artists who are hungry and crazy enough to say, we'll sell our houses to actually have that festival. And then go out and look for the people we don't know. Isn't it?
Yeah. We have an example. One of our artists in the current exhibition is here. His name is Bapi Das from Kolkata. I found his work in Hyderabad by accident. and immediately called them up, and I suggested Anita Dubey to look at his work. What is interesting is an auto driver. He's an auto driver turned a brilliant artist, So these are the kind of findings, sometimes by chance, sometimes by, you need to have the passion, then it will happen, Why it's always in my learning, destiny played an important role. Destiny, it's not God-given destiny I'm talking about. Because of my passion, because of my commitment, because I'm inquisitive to know about things, it all happened. So I think there are possibilities, there are greater things we can make it if we are all committed. That's a very difficult part of it. You have to commit entire life to it. So yeah. But I think like in Kerala case, I would say that we had incredible festivals. It's not just Kochi Moses Biennale. We have great international film festival in Trivandrum. We have fantastic theatre festival in Trichy. And now I just compare, you were talking about the Jaipur Literary Festival. I'm 4 years old, it's only 4 years old, very young festival called Kerala Literature Festival. I visited both the places, and I'm also speaker at Kerala Literature Festival. I see the people, it's a sea of people you could see in a much, much bigger number in Calicut. So these are the kind of people's participation. How do you bring people to location, site is I think that's the most important thing. How you can, and as you mentioned, education from the beginning of your career, that how do you give opportunities to kids? How do you give opportunities for younger generation of thinkers and practitioners? I think that these are the elements, like a great programming, a creative programming is the most important thing for any successful festivals, I would say guideline,
And I think one of the main diseases that art follows today is the sense of myopia, also from artists. One of the things I've noticed when I was doing these 3 festivals was every time I would ask of a new artist to actually show something, they said they showed it. They've shown it before. But the mistake that artists make, I believe, a photography festival isn't for photographers. It's for people. It's not for your friend. It's not for the people you mix around with. It's a literature festival isn't about writers talking to writers. It's about writers talking to people. It's about writers talking to readers. So the mistake we make is we always think that, that I've shown some amount of work and, 5,000 people have seen it. My problem is this, that sorry, but 1 million people haven't. Now you need to show that work to the 1 million people who haven't seen that work. And that is where the myopia needs to change. That is where the understanding has to change. And also, I think the greatest threat to any festival, and the only way we can actually start a festival is, when we start a festival, we must have greed to ensure that the festival lives forever. When people come together, they all want to do it in such a way that, that this is the last time we're doing it, even though it's the first time, right? You have to come together. You have to ensure that you have programs and you have, that sense of purpose and honesty to ensure that that festival I want this festival for 10 years. And hence, I have to take hard choices. In Calcutta, one example, I haven't lived here for 17 years. I came back after a long time. And one of the things I really, really see and face is the problem of appeasement. We need to appease people, or we need to appease artists to get them to be part of a festival. I need to appease my friend, and then hence I want that festival. The question is that person the best person for that festival? Is his work good enough for that festival? These are the questions that we need to ask. These are the hard choices we need to make. What he did with Kochi, for example, he told India that a festival is not about Kochi. If you saw all the art forms that have been actually being performed in the festival, they come from all over India, all over the world. And when I started working on the Kolkata International Photo Festival, everybody wanted works of Kolkata. Everybody wanted artists from Kolkata performing. They wanted Chou or, Padachitros or all of that, which is Kolkata. Now, why can't we get the whole of the world to be in Kolkata? And it took a lot of debate and stuff to finally make them understand that. And today we have 40 countries coming in, and by the time the festival happens, I envisage we have 75. But that, I think, is an understanding that artists must have, isn't it, Bose?
I don't know where to begin about that. I think it is like you can begin a festival, but maybe Shwetal, I would like to pass it to Shwetal because he was there in Kochi from the beginning of the inception of the biennial. When I was thinking about the biennial, I used to live in Bombay and now partly lives and works in Kochi and Mumbai. But Shwetal can maybe give you maybe.
Yeah, I think, Kounteya, I think that each festival or each city or each entity, I think that there's another layer that I think one must look at, which is, how are these things organized, right? Are they for-profit? Are they non-profit? Are they state-funded? Are they funded largely by corporations and brands and sponsors? As the Jaipur Lit Fest is now the Z Jaipur Lit Fest, for instance. The branding in Jaipur is quite overt, right? It's really. In a ways it's become extremely successful and it's grown rapidly, but it maybe hasn't been able to keep up with that growth, although the quality is fantastic. And then you find other festivals that are emerging now across the country. As I mentioned, there's a photo festival, Photo Biennale starting in Chennai. There's a small Biennale happens in Pune. There's a Serendipity Arts Festival that takes place. And then there are a whole host of things like the Magnetic Fields Festival for music.
I was reading there are 37 festivals noted by Kounteya in India, 37 festivals. Of course, there are much more like, Pune, and if you take the names like Pune, there are much more numbers,
I believe we have 65 Lit Fests right now in different pockets of the thing.
I'm sure.
Yeah.
So my point earlier was that, I think that we need to ask questions. Of course, content is important, visibility and how prolific these festivals are, whether in terms of their international repertoire or whether they're looking locally. I'm not sure if that's really the issue. I think that each festival should do what it wants to do, whether that's hyper local and hyper specific or it's international in remit. But I think that in terms of this panel, the idea of building and sustaining, right? It's one thing to build and then it's another thing to sustain. And I think, therefore, one has to ask a set of questions in sense of that, how are these things organized? So, for instance, Kochi was started as a non-profit charitable trust. It got seed financing from the government of Kerala and then has to raise the remainder of its funds, and it works with different agencies and different, the Tata Trust supports the Students' Biennale and so on and so forth. But I think that we as a community or even as audiences need to ask questions as to see how these things are governed. How sustainable are they? What are the working practices of these organizations? Are they exploitative of artists or are they supportive of artists? And if so, how? And audiences cannot simply be measured in numbers. It's a crude way of measuring success, although it's one of the few ways that we have of measuring success is sort of inadvertently through numbers. But I think we need to move beyond those numbers and ask, a deeper set of questions in terms of audience engagement. So I think, for instance, in Kochi, it's come to be kind of known even locally as the People's Biennale. This was, I think, quite important for you, Bose. I mean, you and also the founding team and the Board of Trustees, but also the government of Kerala, was this idea that so-called, uninitiated art audiences were coming in, and partly because of the high literacy rate, but also I think a kind of curiosity within local society. People sit and watch videos all the way through, read wall texts, very curious, attend talks and so forth. But is that necessarily replicable in other parts of the country with different socio-economic contexts and so on?
I think it is it is important to build a brand. That, in the first place, you cannot say that you are building a brand, but you have the trust in the ability of, you can convince and communicate with the locals. And, I wanted to just give you an anecdote, which triggered or which given us the idea about how to share about the Biennale. I was attending an important biennial a few years ago before we started. And opening days of the biennial, all the professional preview people and many of them are there outside the museum, and they are located in different buildings of this biennial. Outside of the museum, there were kids who were playing. These kids, I went up to them and asked, what is happening up there? Just wanted to read their mind. Unfortunately, none of the kids, the neighbor, the living, closer to that playground, those kids have no clue what's happening in their city, and it is an important Biennale is opening, right? Important Biennale for other part of the world, to the other. So I think that triggered in our mind, how to educate, how to share, how to start making community aware of it, how to make aware of the local people. So we produced a small brochure with what is a Biennale and which ones are the best one known, and then why we are doing it in Kochi. And given it to auto rickshaws and homestays, hotels, given 35 presentations in art colleges. It was not just about the Biennale. We were talking about contemporary art world. Because in Kochi, there are no much galleries, So the location doesn't have contemporary art awareness. So our job was to send out some theater people for theater sketches. And also, as you were mentioning earlier, so a poetry session, poets are reading about their poetry sessions, only you find poets. If it is about film conversation, you find filmmakers or film-related people. I think it's very important to all creative industry, creative minds should come together, and that amalgamation is very important to start. That's also the spark of the site, I think,
I think that was the question that I think you were asking as to cross-sector. One of the things that we really focused on and we're focusing on in KIPF is actually getting those people. We have Satyajit Ray's photographs, which has never been seen before. Now, there are several people who we know for different forms of art, but not photography. But when we went searching to their homes, we found there are lots of closet photographers. And the works are such amazing works that was exciting to bring that out. So one of the sectors of that is going to be of that. And that would be exciting to know that, an artist is an artist in whatever form. And if you can actually pick that mind and get that together, you will see different aspects of it. Sustaining a festival, I think, is very important as far as, again, that greed is concerned. Content has to be king. We must be able to find places. One great example to learn is from a different sector called food. Maldives, for example, earlier, was a place that the rich and the famous went to holiday. Everybody wanted food, right? And George Clooney supposedly flies all the way from LA to a restaurant called Salt in Maldives to have lobsters, and then he flies back. Now, everybody tried to find out why that happens. The reason because of that is most of the restaurant owners in Maldives don't have Michelin star chefs. What they do is they go around the world searching for chefs or people who sell food on the street. And then they bring them back and give them opportunities because of the primary skill of being able to cook. And then people realize that these are not the names we know. And that is how the food movement started in Maldives. I think that is where the art movement needs to start in a place like Calcutta or anywhere else and stuff. We must be able to go out in search of people rather than expecting that, that those people are going to come to us. One important factor is crowd participation, are people coming together, isn't it, Bose? So we must have that together, and also aspirational, that, that people who actually get to, when they're not artists, for example, when you see something like Kochi happening, you want to be part of Kochi, then you start getting the courage to actually becoming an artist, and then you create the second generation or third generation.
I have lots of lots of examples like this. Isn't
that true then?
Yeah. It's like as Atul mentioned in the interview, in the clips. The same way I could see, I have lots of experience. When I was watching, observing how people reacted to artwork. Parents bring their kids, and three of them, and father is reading out loudly to his kid. The text is written on the wall. There's another case is that a family of 4 visited Kochi, and the journalist asked them, what do you think of this? That's the first edition of the biennial. What do you think of it? So the lady of the family said, it's completely crazy. It is mad. But we are coming third time. That is very, I think that's also, that's the...
All of it, isn't it?
Yeah, that's very, I find it something great from that kind of learning.
To add something, the Jaipur Lit Fest, for instance, is free. And initially the Kochi Biennial, in the first edition for about 2 weeks, was also free, and we wanted to keep it free. Somebody made a very interesting point at the time, and they said, even if you charge a token amount, it could be 20 rupees or it could be 50 rupees, people will take much more, they'll be much more engaged, and there'll be an investment. They'll be much more invested in it for a token amount. And somebody also pointed out that, people go to the cinema, family will go to the cinema at least once a month, let's say. Cinema is probably the most popular, mass entertainment form we have in this country. And we can see that through the vibrancy of not just, Bollywood, but regional cinema. And so the cheapest ticket would be 50 to 80 rupees, and the cheapest ticket, right? Ticket prices are going up. So a family of 4 going to the cinema for 3 hours, 2.5 hours, popcorn, something to drink and so on. For, fraction of that price, you have, access to, 14 venues, 100 artists with, hundreds of hours of content there. So I think that one has to be very, one has to be very careful in terms of how you engage audiences, because I think that's really key. I made the point earlier that, we can't simply judge audiences from the volume of audiences. We have to ask deeper questions. But nonetheless, it is a marker. But I think that we all need to do much more to get people interested, because there isn't a history of museum-going publics in this country, right? It literally was brought with the British. And on the other hand, we celebrate festivals. And there's a festival, no matter what your religious orientation is.
I just wanted to say here, we had, in 1968, the first Trinale was started in India, the Nehruvian time. Dr. Mulk Raj Anand was the initiator. And, while we were studying, I see a few students here, that's why I'm saying it, I could see, nowadays you can see it in Google and everything, but in imaginative world you can see it. But if I wanted to see an original practice, original artwork from international scene, that Trinale helped me twice, 2 times I could see it. This opportunity you have it in all this young generation of, I see incredible amount of art students, architecture students, even doctors and engineers, lawyers coming to Kochi and seeing the biennial. And, some cases, a young girl, she came 2-3 times, and my colleague noticed this, she wear a parda, and she's spending many times, coming many times, and then we inquired, what do you do, and things like that, you know. So that the fourth time she brought her parents, and she said, I was so totally confused in my life, but this Biennale put me on track. You know, now I'm very confident in my life. You know, so that's kind of transformatory. It's almost like a balm. The art can give that kind of solutions, or I would say medicine in some ways, some kind of medicine.
When we had Durga Puja in Calcutta, right, and stuff, and it ends, everybody goes into mourning because, oh my God, we have to wait for one more year, right? And if we can actually have festivals after festivals that we can actually have, and we have the great people of Calcutta coming together, you know, one of the important aspects of keeping a festival alive is marketing. We have to understand how to market a festival. How do we get non-believers into believing in your idea? So we have to have the gingerbread museum, all right, maybe as the exterior, and have good content inside, right? Otherwise, it's not going to work. In Calcutta, it's not going to work, you know.
Are you suggesting that the popular is as important as the, let's say, you know, highbrow, to use a kind of, that festivals somehow need to make that attempt to kind of bridge audiences?
You know, two things. One is that, you know, you have to understand, like, you know, taking from the example of an Indian wedding, a number of people coming into a festival, quantity, is a very important thing in the Indian psyche, right? So when you have quality and lack of quantity in a single place, it's a failure, all right? At my wedding, 1,000 people came. At his wedding, 50 people came. But maybe that 50 people were the most influential people. But the thing is this, that quantity is that important. But that is an important part of starting a festival, I believe. There also is that word of mouth. It has to live, the festival. And that can only happen when people talk about it. When people come to a gallery like this, which is futuristic in Calcutta, we don't have this kind of a gallery in Calcutta, they have to be here to understand what they have. But it is important for us to be able to get them to get off their sacks and come here. So quantity, of course, is very, very important. And then you bring in quality, and then you educate. And then once the festival has its own format of aging, that is when it works. Otherwise, I can tell you the Calcutta example. That's how it's going to work for me. I know, for example, that, you know, that when I have things populist, part of it, but that cannot be the soul of the festival. The soul has to be quality.
To have an issue where, you know, culture is also happening online, right? It's happening on Facebook, it's happening on Instagram. I made a point to someone the other day that, you know, when was the last time you went to the MoMA? But, you know, it might be a couple of years, or it might be, you know, whenever you're in New York, you might pop in, which is, you know, not on everybody's itinerary. But today the MoMA is present in our pockets, and, you know, you just have to open up your phone, and they're tweeting and they're Instagramming, and so we're much more familiar with the program at the MoMA without actually having to go there. So how does that impact, you know, the real, you know, how do you kind of, you know, in an age where increasingly we're spending more time on our screens, you know, how important is it to actually get people out and get people physically out to places like this?
I think informations are important, but not necessarily the information's always transformed into knowledge, right? So the social media gives informations. I don't think it gives most of the time knowledge. So it gives a certain kind of magic of, I would say, marketing, certain kind of hashtags. You know, it can be marketed. The ideas can be spread it out. But, you know, like if you want to bring the whole society into it, or the part of the community engagement, that needs to be, I think that the location, you know, like I would say location, the site, always that it's history, it's community, the people, how do you understand the sensibilities of those people? But you can transform them, you know, in time to time. I think in the last 10 years, 8 years, Kochi, a 10-year-old boy, now must be 18, 17. So we see a certain kind of growth through art reading, by these kids. And yeah, that's what I can say.
Social media is an evil, but it's a necessary evil. We have to use it for our own advantage. One of the things that we did, earlier in the year, I did a show to support Calcutta's disappearing heritage. Initially, when we were talking about that show, everybody wanted it at the Oberoi Grand because it was a 5-star hotel. But one of the things I put my foot down was that I will only give my show if it can be done in an absolutely dead building. Because people cannot understand what disappearing heritage is if they cannot see that place. Everybody said nobody's going to come, right? There was a stampede. My point is this, that there are people who are willing to give us that chance. We have to be able to take it. And we have to use social media to absolutely get those people. There's nothing like, for example, I think, even today when we watch cricket on screen, there's nothing like being on the field. But that is where we need the entire communication on social media has to be in such a way that it tells people that, that what you're missing here, and you have to be here to be able to experience it. That is when, again, location and content is king.
I think also that its temporality is also very important. When you talk about festivals, some of the festivals remain for 3 to 4 days. Some of the festivals run for months, like the Biennale. Venice Biennale runs for,
or the Fringe.
6 months.
Or the Edinburgh Fringe, yeah.
Yeah. So I think, if it is a permanent a museum or a gallery space, a Biennale is actually a temporary museum, when we look at it like that. I'm not talking about the white Cuban ways of museum, but there, the temporality has a quality of inviting. There is not much time to see it. There is a kind of enthusiasm to know about it. If it is a permanent structure, permanent museum circle, it will become, unless and until the program is not great, we have to make breads and
sadly
honey and things like that.
Sadly, we've run out of time, except we could have one question. Should we go with the lady here? Do you mind? And then we can have the discussion. And we're going to be following this with a tea break, and we'll be back at 4:30 for the final session.
Hello, thank you for the lecture. What are the values a biennial festival has to embody and imbibe to be people's biennial in nature?
It's actually People's Biennial is, we never thought it will become into People's Biennial. Or, the city is also called Biennial City by the mayor of the Cochin mayor called Biennial City. But I think, that the responsibility of the locals to the organizers, I think that spreads the word. And I've seen that curiosity, people are coming from different parts of the world, it's local, regional, national, and international when we look at the biennial. And, I have been in many biennales, but in interim, in between period of, opening weeks, you see thousands and hundreds of people in many biennales. But I think in Kochi, there is a kind of consistency of people's participation and spending time, weeks, and this become almost like a site of learning. I would say that, maybe because of our programming, it's incredible programs conceptualized by my colleague Riaz Komu, and we have children's ABC programs for kids. And Students Biennale, this is the 3rd edition we worked on it. And also we need to have patrons, for the students. When we look at the students' work in this edition, you could see that patronage helped them to produce incredible work. I think if the local doesn't feel the pride, then there is a problem. I think how do they feel proud of their location? And I think in Kounteya, it's almost everybody feel that it's kind of national pride, so that kind of thing. So that's, yeah.
Thank you very much, Kounteya, and thank you, Bose. Perhaps you can ask your question during the break if you don't mind. Thanks.